Welcome to my mommy's podcast.
This podcast is sponsored by Wellness. That is my new line of natural and good for you personal care products. That's wellness with an E on the end. When I realized years ago that there weren't any great natural personal care products that worked as well as the conventional options, I set out to create ones that weren't just comparable, but better. And from there, we've created hair care that nourishes and protects your hair rather than stripping it with harsh detergents like many other types of hair care. We created a toothpaste that works with your mouth, not against it, to develop healthy teeth and gums. And our dry shampoo is my go-to on busy days and after workouts. We also have a natural hand sanitizer that does not dry hands and some exciting new products to come, so stay tuned. All products are based on the idea of working with your body and not against it, filled with nourishing ingredients rather than harsh detergents or chemicals. I would love for you to try them and feel and see the difference for yourself by going to wellness.com. That's wellnesse.com. This podcast is brought to you by Just Thrive, a company that is near and dear to my heart and to my gut. Gut health is really connected to everything, and in today's world, we encounter a lot of things that tend to mess with our gut bacteria, from food to stress and an abundance of environmental toxins. And the gut has been called the second brain, with good reason. We learn more each day about its vital role in all aspects of health, from skin to obviously digestion to energy and even brain health. And Just Thrive Probiotic is the first one I've seen and felt a noticeable difference from almost immediately. They have a patented Bacillus indicus HU36 strain that helps turn your gut into an antioxidant factory, so it's working all the time to benefit you. Since focusing on my gut and making these a regular part of my life, I've definitely seen some big digestive and skin changes. And the Just Thrive Probiotic is vegan, dairy-free, histamine-free, which is a big one for probiotics, non-GMO, and made without soy, sugar, salt, corn, nuts, or gluten, so it's safe for practically everyone. I even sprinkle it on my kids' food, and I bake it into products since it can survive up to 450-degree heat. And this is another important tidbit when it comes to probiotics. You want a probiotic that can survive at temperature, because if it can't, it's likely not going to survive the pretty harsh atmosphere of your stomach. I love all of their products, and I've especially been enjoying lately also their prebiotic drink, which is absolutely delicious. My kids love it too, and is another way to benefit your gut. You can check them out at justthrivehealth.com/wellnessmama. And if you use the code wellnessmama15, you'll save 15% at checkout. So again, justthrivehealth.com/wellnessmama and the code wellnessmama15. Hello, and welcome to the Wellness Mama podcast. I'm Katie from wellnessmama.com and wellness.com. That's wellness with an E on the end. And this episode is all about fertility and the egg quality diet. I'm here with Aimee Raupp, who is a women's health and fertility expert who has written multiple books on this topic, including her most recent, The Egg Quality Diet, a clinically proven 100-day diet to balance hormones, reduce inflammation, improve egg quality, and optimize your ability to get and stay pregnant. She works with clients all over the world, but has really worked to dispel some of the myths around fertility and the body's ability to heal. We go deep on what research shows about inflammatory conditions in fertility, why fertility is an indication that the body is thriving, and what to do when fertility isn't there, what the data says about protein, fat, and carb requirements for fertility and throughout pregnancy, some drastic studies and statistics about increased fertility when women hit certain metrics, and how long it takes to optimally prepare an egg for conception. We go deep on a lot of topics in this one, and if fertility is top of mind for you, I know that you will learn a lot. So without further ado, let's join Aimee. Aimee, welcome.
Katie, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to chat with you because I feel like I'm getting an increasing number of questions related to fertility. It seems like there are certain fertility issues, at least, that are on the rise. And I know that you have some very specific expertise that I think is going to be really helpful, hopefully to many people listening. But to start off, for anyone who's not already familiar with you, can you just kind of give us a little bit of background on how you got into this world?
Sure. I am an acupuncturist and herbalist. I've been practicing for almost 20 years now in my own private clinical practice. Prior to that, I studied biology, chemistry, neuroscience. I was a research scientist. So I think I bring both worlds together. And I started writing books about 10 or 11 years ago. And a very popular one on the subject is called Yes, You Can Get Pregnant, which came out in 2014. when I was writing that book and doing the research for that book and seeing clients clinically, people were coming to me regularly trying to optimize their health and fertility and make babies. I started to notice in the research a high correlation between what I would say undiagnosed or mismanaged inflammatory and or autoimmune conditions and unexplained infertility. And that set me down this rabbit hole, if you will, of, being a research scientist and having the biology and, science background, if you will. I just started digging deeper and I started talking to different reproductive endocrinologists. One that I interviewed for my book, Yes, You Can Get Pregnant, Dr. Hugh Taylor up at Yale. And I said to him, I go, do you see this in the research? Do you see this correlation between if everything's either PCOS or endometriosis, those both act like autoimmune conditions. They have very similar characteristics. Endo is technically an inflammatory disorder, but they all kind of overlap. And he said to me, and then I said, we see so many Hashimoto cases as well in the clinic, or celiac cases. And he said to me, he goes, you're onto something, young lady. He's like, we're starting to screen everyone for these autoimmune conditions because we're seeing them so commonly. So that set me down this whole path where then I wrote the next book called Body Belief. I wrote it on autoimmunity. And some of that was just the editors really wanted a specific autoimmune book, not a fertility book. So, but for me, it was all in the same. And I talk a lot in Body Belief and in all my books, except for my most recent one. But I give you, homework on the side, if you will, but about the emotional and, if you will, mental emotional connection to inflammation in the body. And so with Body Belief, I talked a lot about autoimmunity and how it's this self-attacking self piece, right? And so that Chinese medicine always has this correlate between emotions and disease, as well as physical and disease. And so I really brought that together in Body Belief. But I also discovered, the autoimmune paleo diet and Chinese medicine traditional diets. And I kind of melded those two worlds together. And what I started to see clinically was these long-standing fertility clients, infertility, I don't like to use that word, but long-standing women with fertility challenges that were either having lots of miscarriages or just not getting pregnant, or we know they have endometriosis or polycystic ovaries that we just couldn't manage. When I put them on a diet like this and I addressed the mindset as well, guess what? Things started to shift and dramatically. And I also had the advantage of a lot of them were working with reproductive immunologists. So I got to see that their immune systems were shifting, inflammation was going down. And this was just diet and lifestyle. It was pretty fascinating. And so through that, then I started to craft this diet more and more, if you will, into what I think is a very, macronutrient balance for fertility diet with fertility enhancing foods that also is highly, reduces inflammation. And so that's where I came out with the Egg Quality Diet book, and very specific. It's an elimination diet, but I have found, and I think your own personal experience is similar too, of I have found that it's not easy to do an elimination diet. It's not easy to commit to something like that, but that is the sweet spot. That is where I start to see the shifts in bodies that are telling us fertility is a luxury, right? And so the body's saying, I have enough to make a baby. I got all this stuff. I got an overflow. That's a Chinese medicine perspective. I have enough qi, I have enough blood. But also from a Western perspective, it's saying I am not just surviving, I'm thriving, right? There's two different pathways every day that the body gets to choose. And when we really figure out what's triggering the inflammation, and there's usually always an emotional and a nutritional component, and we do some type of elimination diet, is when I start to see the body shift and the body starts to say, okay, now I have enough, now I can heal this, or now I'm not just surviving, I can start to thrive. And then from there, you do usually see fertility kick into gear.
Oh, so many directions to go from there. The first is random thing for anybody watching on video. You mentioned you're an acupuncturist, and I've actually got a needle in my head right now. Just I woke up with a headache, so I've got one.
Oh my gosh!
in my head to stay focused
Who
today.
put that in?
A friend who's an acupuncturist locally.
I love it. Yeah, you have do 20 in there. That's very nice.
But I love, you mentioned, I think, so many important points and so many directions that we're going to go. But the first being the idea that fertility is, like you said, a luxury, but also it indicates that the body's ready for pregnancy, which is, it sounds so logical to say, but it seems like when we see all these really complicated fertility treatments that don't also address the underlying root causes, it's like your body's trying to send you a message. And when we try to just go around what the body's telling us versus listening to it, it seems like that's somewhat when we run into problems. But the important part that I love about your work is the message of hope within this, because I think often women in fertility struggles feel somewhat hopeless and they're not given sometimes really good, actionable advice from doctors that let them take ownership and kind of go in a direction that might be helpful. And so I love how you unpack so clearly that there are things within your control that you can do that help your body prepare. And that also probably give you a much better chance at a really healthy, more comfortable pregnancy as well, because you're in that then nourished and thriving place. And I wish that our culture was better about that message and getting women to prepare before pregnancy. I feel like often, at least for me with my first one, it was like, oh, I'm pregnant. Now I should figure out what I should do. Whereas it would have been great to know 6 months in advance, like, oh, I can nourish my body in these very specific ways that will help it prepare better. So let's kind of start broad and then delve down from there. Obviously, diet is a big component of this. You mentioned the egg quality diet is an elimination diet of sorts, but also from reading it, like a very hyper nourishing diet. So kind of walk us through just a broad overview of what some of those tenets of the egg quality diet are.
Well, that's another thing. So in the research, I started to see, of course, like Chinese medicine background, been practicing for in the clinic for almost 20 years. I'm a student of Weston A. Price and studied nutrition with them. So the tenets of the diet for me have always been the same. You could go back to my first book from 2010. I wrote it in 2009. I've been talking about the same things. I've been talking about eating bone broth. I've been talking about eliminating sugar and dairy and gluten, or having those things in moderation and really good quality if you have them, avoiding artificial sweeteners, and eating basically protein, vegetables, and fat. And that's been the mainstay of my diet. I've always talked about liver as being one of the most nutrient dense foods, especially for fertility. So we're talking the actual organ meat. But then through the years, there's been more clinical research done on nutrition for different disease states, if you will, and infertility being one of them. And we can see from the data that the macronutrient balance, it's about like 45% fat seems to be, again, that sweet spot for fertility, and about 30% protein, then the rest carbohydrates, but from good quality carbs. I do tend to see many of my patients clinically, and now I get to serve women all over the world with my coaching practice. So literally, hundreds, if not thousands of women do better on less grains too. And so it's fat from good quality sources, like eggs, like good quality meat, good quality fish, coconut oil, avocado, olive oil, coconut milk. And then we're talking, good quality protein. I do find if we hit about 80 to 100 grams of protein from those good quality sources, we automatically fall into the appropriate fat macronutrient balance. It's the carbohydrates. There was an interesting study done out of a fertility clinic. It was a small study, but the fertility doctor noticed he, wasn't having success with this subset of a population, and he had them do diet analysis for him, like keep a food diary. And he noticed that they were all eating on average 60% carbohydrates and only about 20% protein. So about 20% fat. When he switched them to 45% fat, 30% protein, and 20-ish% carbohydrates, and he didn't even necessarily switch the exact type of food they were eating, basically just increased protein and fat, the pregnancy outcomes quadrupled. These were women undergoing IVF without success in the past. So that's, to me, the real tenet of the diet is that there's like about 6 to 8 servings of vegetables a day. I love the leafy greens and some starchy vegetables. You're eating a rainbow of vegetables, and then you're having about 3 ounces of protein 2 to 3 times a day. And then adding in the fat where you can. And so in the egg quality diet, what I decided to do was really simplify it for women, because I kept hearing, probably similar to you, of like what to eat. And, I love my book, Yes, You Can Get Pregnant. I give them a 1 week diet sample. Do you know what I mean? What are you going to do with that? Like it's too general. It's in every fertility book out there. We all have 1 chapter on diet, maybe 2. And so I decided I'm just going to give them 100 days, because we know the process of folliculogenesis, which is the egg that you're about to ovulate, got recruited 100 days ago in your ovary. and is now going through its maturation process inside your body and is impacted by the environment in your body. It's impacted by your nutrition, by your environmental exposures, by your stress levels. So I gave them 100 days of exact menus with shopping lists, with recipes, so I just said, let's just make it simple. Here's 100 days, just follow the diet. So you start off eliminating, and then you spend about 2 weeks in a pretty strict elimination phase where you're drinking lots of bone broth and just simple things, simple protein, simple vegetables, try to eliminate any potential inflammatory reactions. And then we go into what I call in the book phase 3, where we can reintroduce fruit and we can reintroduce different proteins, different vegetables, but we're still off of nightshades and nuts and seeds and soy and gluten and dairy. And then phase 4 is where we start to reintroduce, and we learn. So it's not just a fertility diet, it's your fertility diet. So you learn, like I've learned, white potatoes, no bueno for me, right? Beans, no bueno. Some girls, it's tomatoes and eggplant, right? And others, it's sesame seeds and lentils, right? And some, it's none of the above, and they can even do dairy and gluten, right? So it really just depends on the person and their body, and really the state of gut dysbiosis. I do think it comes down to that. So that's my attempt, is reduce inflammation, heal the gut so the body can start to absorb its nutrition, get out of fight or flight, get into thriving. We should make a baby.
Yeah. And having been
sounds simple,
an elimination diet, not for fertility, but for, in my case, autoimmunity. And you mentioned there's some shared links there. I also remind women, this is not a lifelong thing. It's not that these are forever. In fact, the body's so incredibly capable of healing that often that short time will let the body function so much better long-term. And you can reintroduce often many of these foods. I love that you brought up liver. I have a habit now of often eating raw liver in the morning, just swallowing pieces of it, because to me, that's the easiest way.
Amazing.
To
raw?
get it down raw. I just cut it in
frozen or defrosted?
Defrosted. I just cut it in little like 1/2-inch pieces and just swallow it like a pill. It makes it easier. I think everybody has to figure out their own way.
Yeah.
I also love that you kind of go into not avoiding any macro, because I think anytime there's any kind of issue, there's that tendency to kind of go very extreme. And we are seeing, like fully plant-based, we're seeing carnivore, we're seeing keto. And in a fertility aspect, like you're saying, it's very important to nourish the body. And for women, especially, I've talked about it before, but often I think we're not getting enough protein, especially in fat, like you mentioned. And those are such important signals to the body that it's being nourished and it's not starving. I also love your approach of really focusing on, getting enough of the macros, but really more, how can we get all these micronutrients? How can we eat these nutrient dense foods, which then, of course, we know when you're growing a human, you need all of these nutrients readily available. So I love how actionable you make it and how easy you make it, because certainly for anyone who's in that phase of trying to plan a pregnancy, there's so much involved. And so I love that you just give an action plan, and you can just go and figure out your own diet as you go, which is awesome. And you also mentioned the mindset and emotional component. And I'm so glad you delve into this too, because I feel like this is often overlooked as well in the Western model. And so many women have had the experience of doctors telling them it's all in their head, or that side doesn't matter at all. And having had my own very direct experience now with seeing just how drastically mindset and emotions impact the physical body, I think, especially if we're talking about conception, this is a really, really key conversation to have. So how do you address that with women? What are the aspects of emotions and mindset that you go into?
Well, whatever comes up, really. But I mean, when I'm writing a book or giving, so with the egg quality diet, it's the only book I've ever written, which is a little uncomfortable for me, that doesn't have like a chapter dedicated to the mindset. I have a paragraph that says, please don't overlook the mindset. Go to the website that I've created with the book, and I have a ton of information for you to dive into that. And I did that on purpose, though, too, because again, the diet is intense, and I want them to dedicate those first 50 days to really getting their groove on with the food. And then as they get deeper into, I think it's about week 8 or 9, I start introducing every week. I have a weekly tip for success, and I drive them to the website, where then I talk about things like what I call emotional inflammation. And so getting them to tune in to the trauma that is there and very real, whether it's trauma just, and I say just with, being kind of facetious, just from trying to get pregnant and it not working, that in itself is significant trauma. But there could be previous traumas. There could just be a really stressful environment that they live in, and starting to understand their connection to themselves, how they talk to themselves in the privacy of their own mind, and understanding that that sets the stage for, if you're in chronic fight or flight, it is just not a highly reproductive scenario, right? And so the body's really just thinking, and you can get away with it when you're younger. I definitely agree. Like, but I do think over time, and not, I just think the science shows us too, over time, that this level of stress will tax the crap out of our adrenals, which will impact our cortisol, which will impact all of our male sex hormones, which will impact ovulation, and it will impact your ability to get pregnant. So we know that for a fact. And I think there's a time where we can get away with it, when maybe our system is still pretty, versatile, amenable. As we get older, and I tend to deal with women probably, but I'd say, 30, mid 30s to mid 40s tends to be the demographic I see the most of. I have some youngers, but that tends to be the demographic. And it's around that time that the mindset really does begin to impact. So I say in my book, Body Belief, the thoughts you think, impact your behavior, and your behavior impacts your health, right? So it's all connected. So I could tell you the diet, I could tell you the lifestyle, and when to meditate and how much to sleep, but unless you actually believe that you're worthy of the healing, that, or that you actually see the connection between those two things, it's very challenging to, make that shift and fit those puzzle pieces together. And my mission really is not that positive pregnancy test. It's getting women to live in their bodies and really appreciate themselves again, so they can be the mothers that I think we deserve to be, and the world needs too. So that is my global mission. And most of that is coming back home to themselves and liking themselves again, and liking themselves enough to choose nourishment over chronic stress, right? And so, okay, how can I slow down? What can I eliminate from my life? What do I need to not carry anymore? What burdens or what unresolved, traumas do I have still lurking? And giving them tools. And of course, if they need, more psychological help, encouraging that as well. I'm a huge fan of EMDR. I think it's amazing for trauma and tapping. And so, all of those tools, and just really getting them to get in touch though with like, what's in my way, what's blocking my healing. What is, they say we have, 90,000 thoughts a day? No, 50,000 thoughts a day. 90% of them are the same. So what are those thoughts? What are you saying to yourself? And a lot of times it is, I'm not going to be a good mother. I'm not worthy enough. My body is broken. There's no hope. All my eggs are bad. My doctor told me the only option was adoption or donor egg or whatever have you. And so to get them in tune with those thoughts and begin to shift them.
Yeah. And I definitely discounted that side personally for a really long time. I had dialed in the physical side and the supplements, and I've talked about this a little bit publicly, but I learned very acutely, like, we are the sum of our inner thoughts and the questions that we ask ourselves. And I think, all the memes are true, but none of us would talk to our best friend the way we talk to ourselves often inside. And I had this script that, if only this and this and this, then I will be happier, then I will love myself, or then I will love my body. And it truly wasn't until I made the mental shift that the physical part caught up without really any other physical changes. I already had those things dialed in. And once I got to that place of self-love and feeling comfortable in my body, the physical part of my body adjusted to match my mindset. And I think often we get caught in that trap of thinking like, I'll just change my physical body and then my mindset will change. And often it goes the other way. You also mentioned, I love that you brought up, women being told that their eggs are bad, or that these things are incurable. Or I've heard women be told that when it's PCOS or endometriosis, that there's not really any way to get rid of it, that once you have it forever. Certainly I've talked to women who have overcome it, and I've overcome Hashimoto's, which they said was not curable. So I know firsthand that that's not always the case, but I'd love to talk a little more specifically about that, because I feel often that women are being told that there's not hope in cases when there really is. And especially when it comes to egg quality. And I love that you are addressing that specifically here, because they're told like, if your eggs are bad, there's nothing you can do. And I know that from reading your work, that's not the case, but can you kind of go a little deeper on that and kind of explain some of the results maybe you've seen from women that you've worked with, or what women can expect to see, even if they've been told they have one of these things that Western medicine isn't addressing well?
Yeah. I think you are not broken and you are fixable. And I think that is, goes across the board. Like even you with your Hashimoto's, like we can't maybe cure Hashis, or we can't maybe cure endometriosis. And I'm not sure I totally believe that because I've seen it too, but we can't really say that out loud maybe. And then, but we can see dramatic changes in the body. And so, yeah, I've had those longstanding cases. I've had girls that were trying for 8 years. 8 years is the longest I've had, 8, 6, and they have endo and their tubes are blocked. There's no hope, cysts, all the things. And that's why I got so gung-ho about this diet and this lifestyle and the mindset piece. Because when we put it all together, then these girls that had these most challenging cases started to get pregnant. They'd had surgeries, they'd had miscarriages. I mean, you name it. Or also girls that had never gotten pregnant. I had one girl, 24 fertility treatments, never got pregnant, never once. And then I got her to follow this diet and work on the mindset stuff. And she really didn't like me for a lot of it. And now she has a healthy baby boy. She got pregnant at the age of 42 after 20 some odd failed fertility treatments. And she had been in it for 8 years. So, I mean, and we figured out her things, what they were. She was eating paleo when she came to me. I was like her 7th acupuncturist, 6 functional medicine doctors. She couldn't have had it more dialed in, right? But we figured out she wasn't autoimmune paleo. So she needed to be autoimmune paleo. We figured out it was lentils and tahini. Those were 2 things that she had in her diet that probably couldn't be healthier for many people, right? She was soaking the lentils. She was doing all the things. Those 2 things came out. Her migraines went away. Her sinus congestion went away. Her joint pain went away. She got pregnant. It was pretty fascinating, but it's all shiftable and changeable. And like Chinese medicine, what I love about Chinese medicine is we treat what we see. So if I don't see the signs and symptoms of endometriosis, I'm not going to go berserko over it, right? It's just like, I'm going to treat what I see. And a lot of times, like even in the book, in the Egg Quality Diet, and I have a similar questionnaire in Body Belief, it's hard to measure fertility and egg quality, but I can measure inflammation in the body based on symptoms. And so when I see those symptoms, then I know that inflammation is absolutely impacts every single cell in your body. Why wouldn't it impact the quality of the cells in your ovaries? And then by that token, when you reduce inflammation and you start to heal, why can't the cells in your ovaries also heal? So I make this argument in the Egg Quality Diet that my doctor says, all my eggs are bad, there's no hope. And it's like, yes, fertility declines with age. No one's arguing that, because I think the pipes get a little more and more clogged as we age, and we have to be stricter. But I do think it's still manageable and fixable. But it doesn't account for epigenetics. It doesn't account for the scientific notions that we can heal from heart disease or diabetes or Hashimoto's. Why can't we heal from endometriosis or quote unquote poor egg quality? And it doesn't account for like coexisting health challenges. So for you, for instance, like if you came to me and you had Hashimoto's, right? I'd go after the Hashis first. I wouldn't even think about the fertility. It doesn't matter to me right now. Like fixing the Hashis, fixing the symptoms of that is actually going to help your body become more fertile. And no one's quite talking about that just yet. A lot of the Western docs are just saying, oh, sorry, you're too old, your eggs are bad. And that might be the case, but they're not giving you the alternative that you could, though, heal. You could heal. You could manage that endo. You could manage that PCOS. You could manage that Hashis. And guess what? Then your body starts to get out of that chronic state of inflammation, a fight or flight, and starts to say, okay, I'm getting nourished. I can calm down the immune response. I can calm down the inflammation. And we know for a fact, too, from the data, from the literature, that oxidation ages us. It ages when it comes to fertility, it ages our eggs for certain, right? High stress, high inflammation, egg quality poor. We reduce that stress. We improve antioxidants, right? We give them antioxidants. There's been studies like with melatonin, with acai, with CoQ10, and you see embryo quality or egg quality improve from fertility, from IVF cycle to IVF cycle. And these women are getting older. So it doesn't quite line up. The math doesn't line up, if you will. And I've seen it. I've seen women get older and make healthier eggs, and men get older and make healthier sperm. And so it is. I just think too, it's like if we're walking around saying we could possibly even heal from some cancers, we can heal from diabetes, we can heal from heart disease. Why on earth can't we actually reverse or heal from some of these challenges that are causing poor fertility outcomes?
Yeah, exactly. And remembering the innate wisdom of our bodies, and that the natural state of the human body is to be healthy. And I learned also it's often not the stuff you have to add, but sometimes, like you said, the stuff you have to take away, getting out of the body's own way. It's not that we are healing the body by any means. It's that we are just giving the body the space and the tools to heal and get back to its natural state where it wants to be. And on the mindset side, I think it's also, having been through the Hashimoto side, important to not get stuck in the loop of identifying with your condition and making it part of your identity. Like I got out of the habit of saying, oh, I have Hashimoto's, because that was reinforcing to my body that I have Hashimoto's. And just reframing that and trusting that the body can and is getting better, I think is an important mindset step. Like you said earlier on, if you believe it, that's a big step toward, because then you're going to act in accordance with a way that's going to help support the body in a way you otherwise potentially might not. This podcast is sponsored by Wellness. That is my new line of natural and good for you personal care products. That's wellness with an E on the end. When I realized years ago that there weren't any great natural personal care products that worked as well as the conventional options, I set out to create ones that weren't just comparable, but better. And from there, we've created hair care that nourishes and protects your hair rather than stripping it with harsh detergents like many other types of hair care. We created a toothpaste that works with your mouth, not against it, to develop healthy teeth and gums. And our dry shampoo is my go-to on busy days and after workouts. We also have a natural hand sanitizer that does not dry hands, and some exciting new products to come, so stay tuned. All products are based on the idea of working with your body and not against it, filled with nourishing ingredients rather than harsh detergents or chemicals. I would love for you to try them and feel and see the difference for yourself by going to wellness.com. That's WELLNESSE.com. This podcast is brought to you by Just Thrive, a company that is near and dear to my heart and to my gut. Gut health is really connected to everything, and in today's world, we encounter a lot of things that tend to mess with our gut bacteria, from food to stress and an abundance of environmental toxins. And the gut has been called the second brain, with good reason. We learn more each day about its vital role in all aspects of health, from skin to obviously digestion to energy and even brain health. And Just Thrive Probiotic is the first one I've seen and felt a noticeable difference from almost immediately. They have a patented Bacillus indicus HU36 strain that helps turn your gut into an antioxidant factory, so it's working all the time to benefit you. Since focusing on my gut and making these a regular part of my life, I've definitely seen some big digestive and skin changes. And the Just Thrive Probiotic is vegan, dairy-free, histamine-free, which is a big one for probiotics, non-GMO, and made without soy, sugar, salt, corn, nuts, or gluten, so it's safe for practically everyone. I even sprinkle it on my kids' food, and I bake it into products since it can survive up to 450-degree heat. And this is another important tidbit when it comes to probiotics. You want a probiotic that can survive at temperature, because if it can't, it's likely not going to survive the pretty harsh atmosphere of your stomach. I love all of their products, and I've especially been enjoying lately also their prebiotic drink, which is absolutely delicious. My kids love it too, and is another way to benefit your gut. You can check them out at justthrivehealth.com/wellnessmama. And if you use the code wellnessmama15, you'll save 15% at checkout. So again, justthrivehealth.com/wellnessmama and the code wellnessmama15. And on the age side as well, I think also, like if we look at native populations in other places in the world, fertility often happens much later than it does commonly in America. And so I think that also is a clue to look at what are the diets of these native tribes like? What are diets in other parts of the world where women are having healthy pregnancies in their 40s without complications? And what can we learn from that? I think it's
all fat. I'll tell you, all fat. It's like that book, Deep Nutrition, Catherine Shanahan. I love that book. And she saw in certain populations upwards of 60 to 65% fat. They weren't too low on the carbs though. So keep that in mind, because I don't want to, like, keto is not right for fertility. You need carbohydrates for balanced hormones, but fat does seem to be, and Thomas Cowan from Weston A. Price, he'll say, you want to make a human, you want to make a structure, you need to eat fat and protein. Like that's what you need to eat. And he will never get cornered into saying what a fertility diet is. He will just say what a healthy human diet is, and it's fat and it's protein. But I want to touch upon too what you said about the story, like the story you tell yourself, because I talk about that a lot in Body Belief and in all my teachings. But that's a huge part of the work that I do. And I do think that impacts how you nourish your body too, right? The choices you make every day. Because if it is this thing of like, I have Hashimoto's or I'm infertile, there's no hope. Why on earth are you going to commit to an elimination diet? Do you know what I mean? Like that is a hard thing to do. So it is starting to say, like I'm managing my endo or I'm managing my Hashis, or there are women who have been like me and they figured it out. So I can too, right? So it's that glimmer of hope. You don't have to fully believe it. I always say to women, I'm like, you don't have to believe that this baby's coming until this baby's in your arms if you don't want to. Like that's too much pressure. We don't have to go and visualize. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of meditation and visualization, but that might be too much pressure for some women. So could we though just believe that you haven't missed your boat yet? Could you just at least say that, or that there is room for improvement because you went through the questionnaire and you have 30 symptoms? So could we improve things? Could we reduce inflammation? And by that token, could you then get on board with the fact if I reduce inflammation in your body or you reduce inflammation in your body, the cells in your body are going to be happier? And could that extend to the cells in your ovaries? And so that piece of just starting to like really line up and get on your own team, like I can do this and this will have this impact. And then I am worthy of healing. And then I do think it becomes a little contagious at that point. Then you start to see things shift and then you're hooked, right? You're in it to win it at that point. You don't want to go back to the old ways. I have so many women that achieved their healthy pregnancies and they'll never go back to the old style of eating or living because they feel so much better. And that really is the goal. It's about us being as healthy as we can be, especially if we're having children later in life, so we can be around for those kids too, right? And be healthy and get on the ground and play with them, and but have these healthy pregnancies that we can recover from, give these children the nutrients they need as they're developing in us. So it's not just this positive pregnancy test. That should not be the goal. And it does feel a lot like we're just doing anything we possibly can to get to that positive pregnancy test versus not seeing the larger picture, which again, that book, Deep Nutrition, which I'm like so obsessed with, but I mean, she goes into symmetry and the health of the mother and how that actually manifests in the child. And we know that now. We know like transgenerational traumas, like emotional, but we also know physical. It's the eggs in, you're in my ovaries. Like if we were to have another child and your current children, my current children, we're impacting our grandchildren from those children, right? We know that it's 2 generations, and that's emotional and that's physical. And so if we could step back and see it as part of this whole process, I do think personally for me, that makes it easier to adopt these changes.
Yeah, fascinating book I read recently on the idea of generational trauma. It was called It Didn't Start With You. And it talks about the physical and the mRNA aspects and like how things are passed down through the physical body, and also how that emotional component can manifest in so many generations after. And it's one I wish I had before I had kids, but I've been recommending to a lot of people. And I think it would be another really relevant one for women who are considering having babies. And I'm glad you brought up the carbs component as well, because I think that the keto trend the way it's talked about has been a disservice to women in a lot of ways. I'm a big fan that anything can be a tool in certain cases. I think things can be cycled and be very beneficial. I some days eat very low carb, other days I don't. I think the body's meant to be adaptable. So I like to give it constantly adapting metrics to deal with. But I do think a lot of women undereat carbs. And we know hormonally that can be really stressful to the thyroid. That can be stressful, like you said, to the adrenals. And our hormones do need certain signals. And so like to your point, women's bodies can't handle the same things men's bodies can, especially when we're talking about fertility. That doesn't mean we need to eat processed carbs, of course. There's wonderful options. But also, I think the diet culture, so many women are not eating enough. And that was a surprising thing I found is I was trying to lose weight. So I was eating less and less and less. And my body was holding on to more and more and more. And that diet culture has become so pervasive that I think the mindset shift toward nourishing the body is so key, especially before pregnancy. When you do have this increased nutrient need, increased calorie need, you've got to have a good mindset going into that. So you're not afraid of the food that you need. And I know from having helped midwives in the past and having midwives tell me while pregnant, it's so important to eat enough, like still protein and fat while you're pregnant as well, especially the protein. We know the correlations there with better pregnancy outcomes and fewer preterm
Gestation
deliveries,
diabetes, all of it.
gestational diabetes, preeclampsia. So it's so good for women to be able to understand that and have these habits really firmly rooted so that they transfer throughout pregnancy. And then, like you said, of course, the goal isn't pregnancy. The goal is the motherhood and the whole
Healthy
process.
mama. Yeah.
Exactly. And then passing those things on to our kids. And so I love that it starts with something like egg quality, but really touches every aspect of a person's life and their family going forward and generationally if we start making these habits really stick. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of how you interwove all of that into one book and made it so actionable. I think it also can be overwhelming and you make it so clear and easy.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, you're welcome. And I guess I'm trying to think if there would be any specific questions. I know each condition has its own kind of things that you're going to address, but then inflammation being the commonality. And in that sense, even for someone who's maybe not trying to get pregnant, these principles still apply anytime we're dealing with inflammation. And we know inflammation's on the rise across all.
And it's affecting women. We know autoimmunity, right, is affecting women in their prime, so 25 to 45-ish, affects women 75% more than men. I think that has a handful of reasons. It's the environmental toxins and the exposure we have and how our hormones shift, every week of our cycle. But I also think it has something to do with the emotional component of there's this do it all kind of mentality. You know what I mean? That like we're super duper hard on ourselves, which I think is that emotional inflammation piece. And okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to, I'm also going to get this degree and then I'm going to run my own business and I'm going to be a mom and I'm going to be a partner and I'm going to like run a great household and I'm going to design my home and I'm going to paint this and I'm going to do that. And I'm also, I'm going to have babies. And so it's just, so yeah, in the book, I don't distill so much of like PCOS versus endometriosis versus premature ovarian insufficiency. Those are the three main issues, though, that come up with fertility. Or there's the unexplained infertility, which is basically one of those three conditions, to be honest. Like when you boil it down, what I really boil down, though, in the book is it's either there's inflammation and there's gut dysbiosis. And we're seeing that in basically every single client that comes in. And, Chinese medicine, again, has been talking about gut health and the spleen, stomach, the earth school for thousands of years. And I love to see the Western medicine correlation. And we also have been talking about epigenetics for thousands of years of like how you live your life impacts how you age, basically. And epigenetics is the same thing. So what I try to just be general in the book and say, whether it's gut dysbiosis, whether it's inflammation, whether it's some kind of genetic predisposition, it kind of doesn't matter, because what we're going to discover as you do this elimination diet is what's the right tools for your body. But healing the gut and reducing inflammation never hurt a single person. So whether you have a diagnosis or you don't, or you're trying to get pregnant, or you're just thinking about getting pregnant, I think it's worthwhile to look into the piece of how is my health, because my fertility is an extension of my health, right? Just like, I love Lisa Henderson Jack's book, The Fifth Vital Sign, just like the menstrual cycle and ovulation is our fifth vital sign. That is telling us the vitality of the body, especially for a woman. And so you might decide, I'm going to start having kids at 33, but you haven't even looked at how your body's functioning across the board. So I do think following something, or at least reading through the egg quality diet or looking at the symptom questionnaire and just starting to piece together, okay, how is my health? How is my menstrual cycle? How is my ovulation? And that gives us an idea of how your fertility is going to be. And so many women are on the pill, but they don't even know how their menstrual cycle is too. So that's maybe another episode.
I was just going to say that's a whole area I want to go into, but that deserves its own probably hour.
Yeah, but I mean, we can definitely touch upon it right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's briefly touch on that. Many women would be transitioning potentially off of some kind of contraceptive before getting pregnant. And like you said, that does change your cycle, and it also can mask things. What do women need to know if they're in that transition?
I say, give your body 6 to 9 months to restore normal ovulatory function before you can really see everything that's going on. There are women who get pregnant that first month going off the pill. Sure thing. It happens. I'm not saying it doesn't, but you want to prepare mentally. Okay, I'm going to go off the pill. I'm going to give my body 6 to 9 months to kind of get its groove back, see where things are at, work out any kinks in my menstrual cycle or ovulation. And adopt a diet like this where, okay, I'm going to start hitting my 40% 45% fat, my 30% protein. And because I see it all the time. And even in myself, I can have my busy days because I track everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I only had 60 grams of protein today. What the heck, it's probably similar to you. Like I know all the things and I can still miss it. So really paying attention and almost mapping out what is the next 6 months going to look like for me. Am I going to clean up my bath and beauty products and go non-toxic with them? Because we know they say the average woman's exposed to 500 chemicals before she leaves her house in the morning, and those chemicals severely impact our hormones. What kind of supplements are you going to go on? Make sure you're on something with methylfolate and not folic acid, right? With prenatal, make sure you're taking a good fish oil, and just look at it as like, right. Every woman out there knows, the conundrum of like planning the wedding and all this stuff. And we're saving to buy a house. Why are we not giving that same time frame to the preconception period? And so I do think getting off of contraceptives and giving yourself, really it's like a 6 to 9 month window where you're, as I say in my first book, and I say it in Yes, You Can Get Pregnant, and preparing the palace is what we say in Chinese medicine. So you're taking the time. The palace is the uterus. The translation for the term uterus, Qigong, from Chinese to English, is the child's palace. And so you're taking that time to prepare the palace, getting the ship in shape to receive a child. And I'm not saying in shape to be like physically fit or trying to achieve certain weight goals. It's not at all about weight. I think that has very little to do with fertility, but it has to do with nourishment and how am I going to nourish myself, and setting the stage for that nourishment, knowing you're not just impacting this child, but your grandchild as well. And, looking at that from that larger perspective.
Yeah, that's a great reframe and an important one. I hope that starts to take hold a lot more in our culture. I know other places in the world have it much more dialed in. And as we get close to the end of our time, a couple questions I love to ask. The first being if there's a book or a number of books that have had a profound impact on your life, and if so, what they are and why.
I think I mentioned one, Deep Nutrition. I've mentioned it twice today. That book was just a great book. Nourishing Traditions to go along with it too, from a nutrition standpoint. I think from a mental, emotional standpoint, I still go back, and I think I said this the last time I was on, was Deepak Chopra's The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. Definitely anything by Abraham Hicks, Joe Dispenza. That work really resonates with me and has allowed my mind to open up greatly. And so I can better serve and heal myself.
Well, I will link to those as well as all of your books in the show notes at wellnessmama.fm. So you guys go check those out. Where can people find you online, find your books, and keep learning?
AimieRaupp.com, my website. You can also follow me Instagram. I'm very busy on Instagram with my stories, and I go live every single week talking about important topics, like a lot of the ones we've covered here today. And that's where I really reach my audience and go deep.
Wonderful. I will link to that as well. And Aimee, as always, it's such a pleasure to chat with you. This was so much fun for me. I hope helped a lot of people as well. And you guys go find all of Aimee's work in the show notes at wellnessmama.fm. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
And thanks as always to you guys for listening and for sharing your most valuable resources, your time and energy and attention with us today. We're both so grateful that you did. And I hope that you will join me again on the next episode of the Wellness Mama podcast. If you're enjoying these interviews, would you please take 2 minutes to leave a rating or review on iTunes for me? Doing this helps more people to find the podcast, which means even more moms and families can benefit from the information. I really appreciate your time, and thanks as always for listening.